The stage remains dark until a single spotlight cuts through the shadows. A man steps forward, his voice low and deliberate. Published in 1842, the oval portrait explores the thin line between love, obsession, and the price of art. Observe carefully. Sometimes, a work of art possesses more life than it should. The curtains part to reveal the damp, decaying stone of a fortress. The narrator enters, leaning heavily on his servant, Pedro. "Wounded and weary, we seek shelter in this abandoned place," he murmurs, his breath hitching in the cold air. Pedro retreats, leaving him alone with the flickering candelabra. The narrator drags a chair toward the wall, his fingers brushing over layers of dust on a stack of old books. He shifts the light, and the beam strikes a hidden recess. There, framed in the dark, sits an oval portrait. The narrator stops breathing. The image of the young woman is so striking, so impossibly vivid, that he recoils. He shuts his eyes, his heart hammering against his ribs, trying to process the sudden, crushing dread that fills the room. The chamber lights dimmed, and the castle walls receded into shadow. On a smaller, elevated stage, the scene transformed. A young woman stepped into the light, her movements fluid and brimming with life. She laughed, turning toward the man standing by the easel. He did not mirror her joy. His focus was already fixed on the canvas, his hand twitching with a need to capture her essence. She sat, offering a smile that held only love, but he was already looking past her eyes, analyzing the curve of her jaw, as if she were merely stone or light. She loved the painter. The narrator whispered from the darkness, but he loved his art above all else. The painter lifted his brush, the tip trembling with anticipation. He began to apply color, his strokes rapid and precise. The woman held her pose, her gaze softening as she watched him work. She saw a husband, but he saw only a subject. With every stroke, the atmosphere in the room shifted. A subtle, cold distance grew between them, a quiet divide where the art began to consume the man's attention entirely. He did not notice her hand drop, nor the way her shoulders slumped in the silence of the studio. Days bled into weeks, marked only by the flickers of the studio lamp. The painter worked with a feverish, erratic rhythm. His brush darted across the canvas, capturing light and shadow with such intensity that the image began to pulse with a life of its own. He never looked at his wife, only at the reflection of her essence he was crafting. She sat in the chair for hours, her frame growing thinner, her movements becoming stiff and labored. Once, she reached out, her fingers trembling, hoping to touch his shoulder. He recoiled, his eyes never leaving the canvas, his voice sharp with annoyance as he commanded her to remain still. She obeyed, though her breath had become a shallow, ragged sound. The studio grew cold, yet he did not notice. He was a man possessed, siphoning the vibrancy from the room to feed the portrait. Her skin turned translucent, pale as parchment, while the colors on the canvas deepened, growing unnervingly rich. Each stroke he added seemed to steal a heartbeat from her. She stared into the distance, her smile long faded, trapped by his singular, destructive vision. He was creating a masterpiece, and it was costing her everything. The painter moved with frantic speed now, his hands a blur of motion. He added a final smear of crimson to the lips, a sharp highlight to the pupil. He was breathing hard, a jagged sound that filled the stagnant air. He stepped back, the brush falling from his fingers to the floor with a hollow thud. He stood before the canvas, his chest heaving, his eyes wide. "It is life itself," he shouted, the sound echoing against the cold stone walls. He spun around, his face illuminated by the triumph of his creation, eager to see the reflection of his success in her eyes. He reached for her, his hands still stained with pigment. She did not move. She did not even blink. He gripped her shoulder, shaking her, but her body slumped forward with a terrifying, unnatural weight. Her head lolled to the side, her eyes fixed on nothing. The silence in the studio became absolute, heavy enough to choke on. He pressed his hand to her cheek. It was ice. He looked from the lifeless figure in the chair to the portrait on the easel, where the painted eyes seemed to glow with a cruel, stolen vitality. He had captured the life, and in doing so, he had silenced it forever. Back in the dim chamber, the narrator let the book slide from his trembling fingers. He looked at the oval portrait again, and this time, the truth settled in like a cold weight. It was not merely paint and canvas. The vibrant hue of her skin, The impossible depth of her gaze. It was her life, stolen and trapped in oil. The horror was not in the death itself, but in the theft. He turned away, unable to bear the sight of the masterpiece any longer. The stage lights shifted, drawing focus back to the center as the presenter walked forward, the red curtains beginning their slow, rhythmic crawl toward the center. The presenter looked out into the void, his voice low and steady. When the pursuit of perfection blinds us to those we love, what are we truly creating? The horror is not in the painting, but in the obsession. The cast gathered in the gathering gloom, their silhouettes bowing as the spotlight narrowed to a singular, sharp point. The velvet curtains slowly close, hiding the portrait from view. The final light fades, leaving the theater in silence.